What's up, everybody? It's your boy Nate. Today I am super excited because we have a brand new ComfyUI workflow to show you, and guess what this one does? It takes any single image and instantly makes a 360 turnaround. Now, the reason why I love this workflow is because it's not super complicated at all, and you don't need to download a bajillion files. Instead, if you guys go ahead and click the link in the description box, you're going to be taken to this page, and check this out. We're using the stable video 3D checkpoint, which is the only model that's needed to run this. So if you just go over here, click on this link, it's going to take you to the Hugging Face page. There, you're going to want to go to Files and Versions, and then we're going to be downloading the SV3D Safe Tensors file. Then you're going to go ahead and place that in your ComfyUI Models Checkpoints folder, and then after that, when you scroll all the way down here, you can go ahead and download the JSON file. Just drag and drop that into ComfyUI, and it's going to load up just like this. And just like all of our other workflows, it reads from left to right. So you start on the left-hand side with step 1, and then it goes all the way down to step 4. If you guys need any additional help, we also have this section here at the very end, which pretty much just has the same information that was on that Patreon page. Make sure that you have updated your ComfyUI and you've placed the files in the right folders. Once you have that all set up, then you're going to want to go over here to the left-hand side, and this is where we load in our main checkpoint model. So this is going to be our image to video model, which in this case, we're going to be using the SV3DU file, and you can just go ahead and select it from the drop down there. Next thing that you're going to want to do is import in a photo. And for this example, we have this coffee mug 3D character, which looks super cute. And if I was to go ahead and hit Q on the prompt, it would generate. That's essentially all you have to do. And you can just go ahead and click Q on the prompt, and it'll instantly make this 360-degree turnaround video. And it'll also save out all of the images as well, so that you can go ahead and see them individually here. And if you just click left or right on your mouse, you'll be able to navigate those. Now, the reason why we're saving out the images as well is because we're going to be updating this to also generate the full 3D model. And I think the method that we want to use for that is going to be 3D Gaussian splatting, but that's going to be coming a little bit later on because we're still trying to fix the quality. In the meantime, I wanted to show you guys just how quick and how fast this one works. I think this is probably one of our fastest workflows. Here, I'm just going to go ahead into Google image search, and I pulled up some of these Funko Pop figurines. I got this one, which is Christopher Moltisanti from Sopranos. And if I just drag and drop this here into the left-hand corner, just like that, I hit Q, we can instantly see this workflow start working. Now, because I'm screen recording, it might lag a little bit, but other than that, these generations took me probably less than a minute and a half for each of these, as well as save out all of the files. And it should be finishing up right now. So here we have the 360-degree video, and here we also have all of the images saved out perfectly. So this is pretty awesome because, again, this ran incredibly fast. All thanks to using Stable Video 3D. If you click on one of the images, a little trick is that you can use your keyboard, and pressing left or right will just progress you through that animation as well. And you can really check the quality and determine some of the things that it's doing well and not doing well. I really love that this is relatively consistent, so even as we go across, it looks like it's the same character. Of course, there is a little subtle juddering because we're only rendering out 24 frames for this, but for 3D photogrammetry, this looks like it's going to be a pretty great starting point. Now, if you guys were curious a little bit to understand more as to how this works, I'm going to show you really quickly some of these settings. So in the step 2 area, this is where we have our generation settings, and these are all optimized. So you guys shouldn't really have to touch this at all because we've already spent the time poring over what works best. And in this scenario, Stable Video 3D is trained on 576 by 76 images. And so that's why we're generating out our video using that. Now, we're also using 24 frames because that should give us a solid amount of angles to look at, but you can also crank this value up to something like 36, and that should just give you more angles. Another feature of this is that we're just using a regular case sampler with 30 steps and a CFG value of 8, and we're going to be using the Euler normal, but you could also experiment around with some of these other ones. Another one that produced pretty awesome results was Simple, and it did come out a little bit faster, albeit maybe at like a slight 3% quality decrease there. Over here in the step 3 section, this is where we have our save images settings. So by default, it's going to be saving out to this subdirectory called SV3D images. And then it's going to have in the beginning of the name SV3D, followed by black mixture, which you guys can put in your own name for the project. And then a final file name text as well if you wanted to use that. And then at the very last settings here, we have our save video settings, which is running at a frame rate of 8 frames per second. And then it's creating an MPEG GIF using the Floyd-Steinberg compression model, which tends to produce some of the highest quality GIFs. But if you guys wanted to use something like an MP4 file, you can also just change that there. But since we're going to be sharing this online, I just wanted to save this out using the GIF format. And here at the bottom, this is where we have our VAE decode. So this is what actually takes the samples, turns them into images, and that's what gets saved. Then we also have our video CFG guidance, which again, you guys should not have to touch because these are already optimized and set up to work well. So this works really well for 3D figurines and characters that are on a solid plain background. But I want to show you an example as well when you don't have an example that's as clean as this. Let's go ahead and try this out with something that is a little bit more complex than these Funko Pop characters, just to show you really where this model shines and where it kind of struggles. So I'm gonna pop in this white Stormtrooper model, which actually has it on a white background, so that might be a little bit tricky for it. And let's go ahead and drag and drop this right in here, and then hit Q on the prompt, and let's see the final result. Okay, so this one has finished out. This is our Stormtrooper example, and the reason why I wanted to show you this is really to show you the limitations of this as well. So in this scenario, we have the subject, which is not as clearly defined from its background because it's a white mask on a white background. We also have some very complicated shapes, which is kind of tripping it up a little bit. So it does look somewhat decent, but this is definitely not going to be where this model shines. Another example that I want to show you now is one using a real person, and for this case I'm going to be using MKBHD, and he's actually on a background. It's not a completely solid background because there is some shading and some depth here. If you were to imagine it as a 3D model, it would be extremely complicated. And so what we're going to do here is just leave it at its default settings, but I'm going to crank this back down to 24, change this back to Euler normal, and then let's go ahead and generate and see how it handles a realistic human figure. Okay, so this is the final result. Now, one thing that you're going to notice is because this is not a square aspect ratio photo, that we do have some cropping. And again, since it is a complicated character and shape, and this is mostly just trained on 576 by 576 images, it's not going to be the highest quality output, though it does give us a very rough outline of a 3D shape and figure. So if you were to use this for creating a very rough character model, you probably could, but again, your mileage is going to vary on this. Now I want to show you though an example where it really does shine in a scenario that you actually would not really expect it to. So does anybody remember the old school Game Boy Advances or even the Game Boy Colors? So I'm going to actually type in Game Boy Color, and let's try this out using this old purple translucent Game Boy Color. And as a little fun fact, I actually had this one. This was my very first gaming console. So yeah, it should be pretty cool if it's actually able to generate a full 360-degree turnaround. Now, if you are familiar with the Game Boy Color, you would know that its back is completely different from its front in that it has an entire little divot or cutout for the game cartridges. Okay, so this is its final result, and I gotta say, it's not the best looking image. In this example, we've only shown it its front, and I want to show you how you can actually get a better result if you just have a different angle of the object. So let's see if we can find an image here that's a little bit more angled. And I think this one might actually work well for it. Even though it's not on a solid background, hopefully it's able to pick it up. And if not, we'll just do some pre-processing on it. Okay, and this is the final result that it's given. As you can see, if you have an image that's already angled, even if it is on a background that's not completely cleaned up, it's going to give a much better result. So we actually start to see some of the details here in the shape of the object where it's not a completely flat background, but instead we have that little divot and area for the cartridges, as well as the battery bump on the sides and on the back. So this is a much better result, but of course there's so much more that we can take this. So in this more advanced version of the workflow, we have it where it not only takes the input image and makes the 360 video, but it actually creates first a pre-processing phase in which it removes the background so that it's a little bit easier for the model to understand. Now, if you guys are curious how this works, you can actually change the background color, though we found that dark gray works best. But if you do have a subject that's already dark gray, then you can just select any of the colors here and it should work perfectly. So for example, we can change this to green. And if I hit Q on the prompt, it not only resizes the image, but it also removes the background and then produces it composited on top with a green background. So again, you shouldn't really have to change too many settings, but in this variant of the workflow, we have now this background color node to help you out if you're getting some quirky generations. If you guys were curious to make this for yourself, it's pretty simple. We're just using an image resize node hooked up to an image remove node, and then we invert the mask, and then we composite on the masked area with our generated background color. And this is the final result. It's kind of interesting too to see that it's not only removing the background, but also influencing the back color of the model. So that's pretty cool. And then to show you another example with this, so let's go ahead and take this image of a sports car, pop it in there. This might be really difficult because the background is very, very detailed, but let's go ahead and see if we change this now from a green background to instead something like, let's do dark gray again. And then I'm going to hit Q on the prompt, and look at that. It has removed the background, shows us this preview image. And you can even see some of the time that it took for all of this pre-processing. It's not even a second. It's really just working in fractions of a second now, to where the longest portion of this is just the sampling. And even that only takes about a minute to a minute and a half on an RTX 4090. So if you guys are working with a lesser powerful graphics card, it might take you maybe 3 to 5 minutes to generate these. But again, this is one of the faster models for generating these 360 turnarounds. All right, I gotta say, I'm not too hopeful for this one to work. I've not tested it out with this kind of variant before, but let's go ahead and see this final result. And it should generate the video first and then save out the images afterwards. And this is the resulting 360 that we get. A little bit crushed here and not the best result, but still kind of interesting. I think if we were to work with something with much more simplified shapes, because I think those doors being open is something that kind of messed it up here. So in another example, we have this glasses case here on a solid background. So we don't even really have to pre-process this, but I'm just gonna go ahead and leave this to white. And then you get the preview image to where it creates that in a nice 1:1 aspect ratio. And so this is what that final result looks like. And it did not come out too well because surprisingly, sometimes you actually don't want to remove the background as often, because I actually think that parts of this are getting a little bit tricked up because we have a white background with this white area here on the edge. I actually went ahead and made this workflow a little bit more advanced by adding in this switch here, which is not only going to allow us to remove the background, but selectively choose if we want to. So over here in the generation settings under step 2, you can either select the option 1, which is just going to use that original image and its background, or you can use your removed background by selecting 2 here on the node. And it's also going to show you this little preview at the bottom so you can see what that background color and final resulting image looks like. So now that I've switched it to 2, if I go ahead and hit Q on the prompt, you're going to see here in the K sampler, already the background is looking cyan. But if I was to set it back to 1, and then if I hit Q on the prompt, you're going to see that the K sampler image is actually going to be white for this example. So just a little quick tip on how to use this workflow if you're not getting the best results out the gate. So all of these variants of the workflow, from the simplified to the more advanced version with this removed background, is all going to be up on the Patreon. For our final example, let's go ahead and use a really cute character. So I'm going to pop this one in here. We're going to set it to the original background here. Okay, and that is our final result. So this is looking awesome. So if we actually scrub through here, we can see we got a pretty decent generation where it looks like the character is consistent from all of these angles all around. So really awesome job here. I think this model really shines with 3D characters, kind of simplified shapes like these, and also images where you can see a little bit of the shading and the background so that it gives it some information about that 3D depth. I hope you guys enjoy this workflow and have fun at making these 360 turnarounds. In the future, we're going to be improving this to make sure that we can actually generate a 3D model that's usable. So make sure you guys go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss out when that comes out. It's probably going to be coming out super soon. I hope you guys enjoy this. I hope to catch you in the next one. Until next time, all right, peace.